Hello, and welcome to World Water Week. The availability of freshwater resources and their quality are deteriorating at an alarming rate. With growing pressures from climate change, urbanization, and a growing population, we need all actors working together to address inefficiencies and to forge innovative but inclusive ways forward. In today's discussion, we're speaking with actors from two ends of the water spectrum to get their take on what's needed to build stronger water systems that are responsive to the needs of both people and planet, and the critically important role that water governance has to play. I'm really honored and pleased to have both Nancy Eslick from the U.S. Agency for International Development, Global Water Coordinator, leading the agency's implementation and responsibilities under the U.S. Global Water Strategy. Welcome. And Anne Le Guenec, a Senior Executive Vice President for Worldwide Water Technologies for Veolia, where you're sharing views from, or today you're going to be sharing views from a global leader in environmental services to industry and municipalities. Welcome, ladies. It's a pleasure to have you here. Nancy, I want to start with you. Water security is consistently ranked as one of the biggest, most significant threats facing the world today. So tell us, how is water security featuring on the USAID's agenda, and what steps are being taken to prioritize the issue?
Sure. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you so much to Siwi and to you, Kanika, for inviting us here to talk. It's such a pleasure. On to your question, I think, first of all, we need to recognize that water has no boundaries. It affects all of us, whether from droughts or floods, having too much water in Asia after a typhoon, having not enough water in Africa after a drought, in the US, Europe the same. It affects all of us equally. But it's even more exacerbated when you have poor water management and poor systems. And as a result, it hurts those at the bottom of the social safety net more. And so right now, for USAID, what's critically important to me is that there are 2.5 billion, yes, I said billion, people that do not have access right now to safe drinking water. And so what's going to happen in the future as we see more conflicts, more humanitarian crises? This number is potentially increasing. I think one of the other things that is really important to me from the U.S. administration and the Congress is our U.S. Global Water Strategy. Since 2002, we have committed over $1.2 billion in grant funding. We will continue to be dedicated to this topic, along with our domestic water and sanitation agenda. I think one of the other things that we're really looking at is how to expand the sector, because it's not just about grant money or leveraging our finance. It's about how we can expand to help those 2.5 billion people. So part of what USAID is committed to is bringing $1 billion in non-US government funding to bear to help the water and sanitation situation. So it's a little bit about how we're looking at water security, which is helping those 2.5 billion people, looking at the future and what's going to happen with additional climate events, and what new resources and technology. And I'll talk a little bit later also about the governance factor, but I'll leave that for later.
Okay, maybe I'm going to just come back to a point that you mentioned there about the expanding of the sector. Can you give us an example of what are you doing to expand the sector?
Well, I think some of it's that finance side of things, but it's also partnering with great companies like Veolia in how businesses have a role in providing water services and water goods, whether it's giant infrastructure or servicing a tap in the middle of DRC for a jerry can of water. The private sector also has a role in how we're expanding, looking at water and sanitation, in addition to also national governments, and looking about contributions that national governments are making towards their own investments. I know that the World Bank thinks that about 4% is the sweet spot for national governments to be contributing to their own water and sanitation. And in many places globally, it's well under 1%.
Okay. No, that's really important what you're saying there. And so I hear, expanding the finances that's needed, but also expanding who's contributing, bringing in other actors, strengthening the role of the private sector or businesses and what they have to play here. Anne, I'd like to come to you. We just heard about USAID's approach to water security, but I'm also curious, how does water security feature in Veolia's work, and what's your involvement in water management?
Thank you first for having me on this panel. We at Veolia have water at the core of our agenda for a very long time. We operate in the 5 continents, and we are providing 113 million people with drinking water, and almost the same with sanitation services. So you can see that we are doing this for a very long time, but we have to acknowledge that the agenda is accelerating now with climate change. And our new strategic plan that we call Green Up is really about accelerating, speeding up the pace of our action toward the agenda and expanding the sector. Green Up is all about making green what is not green yet. It's not about providing, green facilities and things like this. It's really about taking the burden from the municipalities and the industries that need support in developing the water sector for our topic today. How do we do that? Well, we have strongholds which are operation in the various geographies. We operate everywhere, but we now have boosters, and we are investing a lot on technologies. Technologies are at the core of the game. This is really a game changer, and we are investing in R&D. We do own 10 labs all around the world, and we've developed already 4,400 patents. So we make sure that we are always ready to tackle the challenges of tomorrow when it comes to water quantity and water quality. One good example of this will be, of course, water reuse, because for a very long time we are advocating that water is too scarce to be used only once. And we are offering to our customers, being municipalities or industries, all the technologies needed to make sure that they can reuse the water. We've done a lot treating the wastewater from municipalities for irrigation, so we save water from the agricultural sector. But we've done more than that. We've done reuse of wastewater treatment plants to be drank directly. And this is an example that we have for a very long time in Namibia, and that hopefully will expand very soon, as we've seen that California, for example, has taken new regulations so they make it possible. Because we, as Veolia, we are an expert in water management. But we are not a public authority. We're not the one who decide of the public agenda, the municipality priorities. And we're not a bank. We're not the one financing. Sometimes we get involved in financing projects, but this is not our core business either. So the entire ecosystem needs to be mobilized so we can actually make sure that we make the most of the technologies that we have and of the technologies that we want to reuse. But technologies are not only for municipalities, because the industrial sector consumes as much water as the public sector. So we are also addressing this. And I have also a very nice example that I could give to you, where, for example, with Nestle in Mexico, China, other part of the world, for the food and beverage sector, they're not discharging anything, and they've reduced significantly their consumption of fresh water by just reusing the water that they need for their process. Tackling everything, all the sectors, is absolutely key so we can achieve our targets.
I mean, it sounds like you're really going the whole way. You're working with the smaller actors. You're also working with larger actors, like you said, just Nestle now, and bringing technology into all of this. But also, it seems very much that you're trying to evolve with the time. So you see these opportunities coming and moving along with it. So Nancy, I'd like to hear from you a little bit about that. How are you leveraging technology in your work, and what kinds of partnerships are being formed as a result of that need for technology?
Thanks, Kanika. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that technology is one of those solution sets. And for USAID, whether that is new smart meters, solar pumping, new data management collection, like the technology is there. But what's not there sometimes is the governance, the decision making to use and deploy that technology so that we can get to water use, we can get to efficient use, we can lower non-revenue water levels. And so this is one of the reasons why it is a core of the U.S. Global Water Strategy to work on governance. We're going to work with policymakers at all levels of government, national, local, regional, so that they're able to make good decisions and that they have good data to make those decisions. Because we need governance. And what does that mean? They need to be able to enforce regulations, develop regulations, have laws, have understanding with utility operators, with communities. But along with that, it's also about promoting clear regulations and procurement. And that even playing fields for businesses really is a security factor that there's governance there. And when we know that these key essential things are in place, the water sector is going to attract businesses and it's going to attract money and new money. And that is when we're going to be able to expand the aperture of which we're being able to provide services, increase standards, and make sure that innovation is meeting the right new markets. For me personally, one of the ways I'm looking at innovation and how we deploy is partnerships. It's core to how I think that we all need to be working. There's less money in the sector, so we have to really work efficiently. But it's not just about money, it's about knowledge, it's about expertise. It's what we each bring to bear to a situation. So partnerships at all levels. And I think that this is where we're going to be able to really expand and skip to the modern technology and deployment by strengthening governments. A couple examples of this. One is in Indonesia. USAID has a large program there. It's one of our high priority countries. We're working on governance in Indonesia. We've helped 91 institutions and formed 91 partnerships. But through that, we've bought $250 million of new non-government, non-donor money to bear in Indonesia to expand the water sector. For me, that's also about what Indonesia is doing on their governance. You've got $250 million of direct investment and partnership because they know that there's great governance. And so using this new money as a catalyst to adopting change and accelerating the pace of things.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like once again, you're bringing in maybe actors who otherwise might not have been able to be there. You're creating that opportunity and saying, as you said, 250 million. Is that what you said? Yep. $250 million worth of investment in critical infrastructure, in critical life-saving and life-giving works that otherwise might not have been formulated or been able to come to fruition. But I'm also taking very importantly what you said, technology is there, but governance is missing. I think that's a really important point. I think for all of us here in the water sector and sitting in this room or online, something that we need to take with us, that we can come up with all these great solutions, but if we forget that there's people at the core of that, and that people's input and participation is critically important as well. So thank you for raising that.
It is. And if it's okay to share another example, a country that I spent a lot of time in is Jordan. I was there for 4 years, and it's a great example of where there's an intersection of the things that we're talking about. the right technology, the right governance, financing. So in 2000, the government of Jordan, USAID, Veolia, entered into an agreement to build a wastewater treatment plant that was state of the art in the year 2000. It's been expanded on since, but it is the single wastewater treatment plant providing treatment for the entire city of Amman, which is more than 50% of the nation's population. And I'm proud to say that is one of the ways where, the situation had great governance, we had the right technology, and we're able to provide the right water service delivery to citizens. But who's providing that? It's the government of Jordan.
Interesting, very important. Thank you so much for that wonderful example. I think it's also a really great segue to my next question to Anne. I think we generally talk about, or I think oftentimes in the water sector, when we're talking about scarcity, we're often talking about, or security, we're often talking about, we feel like we're talking about quantity, how much water is there. But that question of water quality is also really important. It's not enough to just have a lot of water. It has to be of good quality. And so you touched upon a little bit before about wastewater and how important that is, and also the wonderful example you've just shared here. But Anne, I'm really curious to hear from you. How is the water industry taking up the challenge of water quality, and where is it featuring within your work?
Maybe to answer your question, I will bounce back on what Nancy was saying and the challenges that the governments are facing when it comes to water management. Indeed, technologies are mature to treat whatever challenges we have today, but I think that what we need to do as experts in water technologies and water management is really to be able to give some more confidence to the governments that we will be able to accompany them on the long term. Being because the demand is growing, being because the context is changing, or being because the quality of the input of water is changing, or being because the regulation and need to make sure that we will preserve the health of the people will be also guaranteed. So we are investing more and more into making sure that our technologies are more efficient so we can give that kind of confidence. I will come back on the quality challenge, but we are also keen to make sure that we have a holistic approach when it comes to performance. Can be just because we need to make sure that our technologies actually provide the right services at the right moment and being compliant with the request that has been made at the beginning. It can also be because we need to address the energy consumption of our processes. And that's a topic that the government also need to tackle, meaning all the energy, all the water processes consume energy, and some of them are quite intense. For example, desalination is a very good solution when it comes to providing water to places where you don't have any other resources. And we've worked a lot on decreasing the energy consumption of that kind of technologies. We reduced it by 5 in just a few years. So now desalination becomes not only more affordable, it also becomes a real solution for the people who don't have fresh water anymore. So performance is key. Proving our performance is also key, and this is where innovation in digital and AI comes in the game, because we need to give confidence again to the government that they do have the right technologies to solve their problem. And of course, the problem is a lot about quality, and this requires continuous development, R&D, and we work a lot with startups, doing sometimes some M&A to make sure that we take the best from whatever pops out in the market. And water quality is a challenge. There is water. Water is never at the right place, never of the right quality. So we work a lot in making sure that we keep the pace and that we are compliant at any time with the regulation. One example would be our innovation to make sure that we treat phosphorescent nitrogen to be compliant with the new wastewater treatment directive in Europe. Also true for the PFAS, eternal pollutants, and the new regulations that are put in place in the US. But not only. Not only, at any time we need to give that confidence to everyone that water is safe. And we at Veolia, we conduct every 2 years a kind of giant interview that we call the Ecological Transformation Barometer. We interview thousands of people.
I'm so sorry, and I'm going to ask you just to wrap up quickly because we're already over time. 20
I
minutes
promise.
goes quickly.
I will. But through this interview, we acknowledge this year that 2/3 of the population is actually concerned by their health. We were talking 2 years ago about saving the planet, making sure that we do have water for our children and that we will save the resources. Today, health is of the utmost importance. So water quality is at the core of our R&D for technologies.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I think it's a really important message. We need to hear where people are and what's important to them. I want to thank you both so much for joining this conversation. 20 minutes just flies by, especially when there's so much content there and such knowledgeable people to talk about it. But we're taking away, I think, a lot from this conversation. And you've really brought really important, two very different perspectives to this, from the private and also from the public sector. So thank you so much for this. We're looking forward to seeing more of these types of collaborations and discussions in the future. Thanks very much. And thanks very much to our audience for joining us today.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry.